Dashideli. I am who they call Mommy Max. I am Max Mathews. And one Thanksgiving we were celebrating, that was November of 1968. We were in the gallery having a party, celebrating and being thankful for everything that we could remember to be thankful for. And there was a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and there was this Western woman standing in a Tibetan chuba, and it turned out to be my old friend Zina Reshevsky. Oh God, that was exciting that she had found me again. Originally, we met in Greece. I taught 5 years in Greece and befriended and became great friends and companions of Zina, who turned out to be the first Western disciple of the Tibetan Lamas. And she had come to Kathmandu and brought the Lamas with her. And she looked me up, and she, from our past experience together, she knew that I would be working and having something, and she wanted to request me. She came specifically with the Lamas because she had run out of money and run out of time, and she had been traveling through Asia with the Lamas, and she brought them to Kathmandu on purpose of leaving them there and trying to get a center for Buddhism started in Kathmandu. That's what the Lamas had requested of her. And at this time, she was no longer in position, so she asked me and literally begged me, because we were friends and enemies and friends and enemies, in and out, up and down, unbelievable relationship. In Greece, in 1960, I met Zina and Anila Ann, who was a Canadian woman, and she had come to Greece to live her life because her sister also was living in Greece at that time, and she was working in a travel agent's office. Anne was a nice 6 feet tall, and she had arrived in Kopan in her Volkswagen bus. The Volkswagen was the queen of motor vehicles at that time. Everybody was driving Volkswagens, cars and buses, and many of the foreigners in Kathmandu, the diplomats, owned those vehicles, although we had very few roads in Kathmandu and almost none paved. So Zina knocked on the door and joined our Thanksgiving party. And she, at that time, she asked me, begged me to relieve her of her responsibility with the Lamas. And it seemed as though His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, had requested Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa to begin teachings for the Western world. They were to give up their Indian students and take on the West. And Lama Yeshe had walked with many of the Tibetans, and as many of them had done, they left Tibet and Lhasa in 59 when His Holiness went into India out of Tibet, leaving everything that they couldn't manage to transport. And Lama Yeshe had studied Buddhism. His uncle was in not Sera, but in the Tibetan monastery. Lama Yeshe had been a woman in a previous life, a nun, and he started his own nunnery and monastery in Tibet, which is still standing. Lama Zopa was at that time, he was born in a Sherpa, in a Tami, a village in Nepal, in the Sherpa countryside, near not very near, 14,000 feet in up Everest area, in the vicinity of Everest. And he had tried at age 3 to leave home, going over the mountains somewhere to try and go back to Tibet. Many times. Anytime he was missing, they went looking for him, and he was on his way back to Tibet. That's his story and his life. Wow. Rinpoche. So I promised Zena at the time that at that time I had some funds because of the art that we had been in collecting funds, and then I understood why and where that emphasis had come into my heart to do that, because evidently the Lamas had, in a previous life, had sent me on a journey that I didn't even know about. So somebody would be ready, and when they showed up, and be ready and here to help them with whatever they needed, whatever they needed. I promised the Lamas when I met them that I would always be there for them and do and help as much as I could and provide service for them and their journey. So when I arrived in Kathmandu, I had no idea that I had made that promise and pledge to the Lamas. But when I went to the Gelupa monastery in Kathmandu to meet the Lamas the next day with Zena after Thanksgiving, and I had promised Zena I would take care to my best ability of them. So Lama Yeshe was the first one I met, and he opened the door, folded his hands, and bowed to me. And at that time my heart went zoom, open, and I was on the floor and in tears. I was crying so hard because whatever he did to me, he put in my heart when he opened it, is still there. And I cried and cried. It was like years, but it was only like 5 minutes. And Lama Zopa then showed up. And that very moment from the floor, I promised Lama Yeshe, because he requested me, and I gave my life, my heart, my body, mind, and soul to him forever, forever. As long as they needed me, I would do whatever I could to help them succeed with their journey as requested by the Dalai Lama. So that was the beginning. There were not a lot of people around with spare funds and money, and the very next day Lama Yeshe went walking. Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa would take walks every day. I told them whenever they needed and wanted me, and I gave them access to the gallery with all the stuff the Tibetans had bought. And I told them anything they wanted they could take, because I paid the Tibetans what they asked, what they needed, what they wanted. And everything they bought, I bought from them. And I gave the Lamas access. So I would leave home like 7:30 in the morning and come back at 5. I began to live in two worlds. The Lamas walked up to Kopan. They climbed the mountain. It was visible from Kathmandu Valley, from certain areas. And they walked and they found the astrologer's house on that hillside, because nobody, no living being could live above the king. The king was God Almighty, and nothing could live above him. So there were no houses at Kopan. Around the Kopan hill, which was very visible and available, there were some farmers and their families. Very poor people. They just grew enough to live on. Everything at that time in the valley, and that was 1968, late December. Everything was rationed, even cement and bricks and water. The water they had to carry from down the bottom river below the hill of Kopan in biscuit tins hung around bamboo rods on their shoulders. All the water that they had access to, they had to carry up. There was an incredible tree on top of the hill, and just this one resident that the astrologer, as far as I know, that had been used by the astrologer, who was no longer there, and the house was not used. Lama Yeshe opened the door and walked in and fell in love with that house and that hill, and he came home and came down. They were still living in the monastery at the time. And he said, "This is the place I want to start the monastery." So that was the beginning of another time. We had the diplomatic community in one locale in the city that had the presence and semblance of a Western existence in Kathmandu. And then on the other side, we had the Sherpas and Nepalese and the trekkers. Everything was done in Nepal by walking everywhere. I don't know, I don't remember if we had airplanes at that time, 1968. I'm not sure. It doesn't come back to my mind. if there were planes, but Sir Edmund Hillary. And there must have been, because the Americans brought everything in by air. So I assume at that time, Royal Nepal must have been. And Pan Am was definitely coming into Nepal. So the Lamas began walking up and down the hill to the house every day. And soon they managed. I had monies from the art, which I turned over to them. And they began negotiating. I assume something was in writing, but they managed to get the house. And Zena rented the house the first time. We were able to get it. She paid for the rent. Zena always had an entourage with her, people who looked up to her. She was quite a character. Unbelievable, beautiful woman. Not any longer, but in her earlier days. Beautiful, beautiful. So she furnished the house with a beautiful white carpet, huge white carpet, and I don't remember where her entourage settled. She put herself in the biggest and best room and took the best there was and put the Lamas somewhere outside in her style of life. She was the queen and everybody else was under her. She said to me when we walked Kopan Hill, "I will never throw myself. Look at those peasants prostrating to the Lamas. I will never throw myself down at their feet." It was Zena. It was just who she was. That's how we had fights. We would fight and we would make up because we were so different. I was falling all over the Lamas, couldn't get enough of them, and she was in her atmosphere. Oh, God. Yeah. Also in Greece, when I met Zena, I met Anne. And Anne was more like me. She was a bit humbled, she was wanting to follow Buddhism and to know what the Lamas had to offer. Of course, we had at least 5 years in Greece together before the Lamas even came, they weren't even in our knowledge when we parted. We didn't know that we had all been students of the Lamas before. Now we have come to a point where Zena is occupied on one side with her entourage. The Lamas are occupied walking the land, getting to know the surroundings, getting to know Kopan Hill, making deals with the landowners and trying to settle the property and buy up. And Lama has befriended one farmer, Chokidar, he called him, and Chokidar became Lama's go-to man. Anything that Lama needed concerning villagers' property rights and ownership and all of that, Chokidar was Lama's man. Lama did all his dealings with Chokidar and the water situation. Water had to be carried from down. Chokidar arranged everything. So we were now in business. And I was spending my days and life week in the city and the weekends on Kopan Hill. And at that point we decided Lama Zopa was really anxious to go home. he had been thinking and trying to go before, but it wasn't. Lama Yeshe had to have his mind settled that Kopan was a possibility. So Lama arranged the trip for us to go up to Laudo, and Zena had invited her French filming crew to come and make the trip with us to Everest. We were taking an airplane to Lukla, 8,500 feet, and from the bottom of Lukla, we walked straight up to 12,000 feet, which was Namche Bazaar, the big Sherpa village, town environment. And from Namche Bazaar, there were huge dwellings, so many Sherpa families and people and artists, and there was everyday market in Namche. People came from all around the villages, all around the hills, and Namche was their exit point. And they would buy and trade and spend the whole day negotiating, and then they would go home. Next day, the same thing. So we started walking from Lukla. This was early 1969. Zena, her film crew, and my best friend and her boyfriend, Judy Weitzner and Chip, were with me and the Lamas. We had a very small crew. And as soon as we hit 11,000 feet, I fainted. And then came hot butter tea from a runner from Namche and picked me up and carried me a small distance. And then I was able to walk again. And we finished the trek and arrived in Namche. We were quite a sight. And of course, the film crew was very much at work. They filmed the whole thing, the area. We spent maybe a week in Namche. Many of the villagers knew Rinpoche. Lama Zopa was the Laudo Lama. He had been in Tibet studying at the monastery, and people would come running out with katas and gifts, and just because Rinpoche had not come back since he left Laudo to go to Tibet to study. Now was the first time. So at this point, he must have been early 20s, I'm guessing. I don't really know, but the people recognized him and were so happy that he was back. And then everywhere we went, the people would come to Rinpoche and they would request that he would please set up a traditional monastic school for boys. They begged and pleaded with him to open this school. And I don't remember Rinpoche's response, but I'm sure he agreed, because first Mount Everest Center for Buddhist Studies was opened with 27 boys at Laudo, which had become Lama Zopa's cave. Many people remember feeding him potatoes in a previous life. And he and Lama Yeshe had decided that they would start Kopan at Laudo, where Lama Zopa was living. And Lama Zopa was going to stay at Laudo, and Lama Yeshe would stay with him for a while until we could get things moving in Kopan at the Kathmandu Valley. So they took 27 boys, the first. There's an old photo, I'm sure it's in the book. And I provided them my check, and they did what they needed to do with it. And I never asked, never questioned, never. I took what money I wanted before I gave them what money I needed for living. And my life had suddenly changed for the better. And I was happy being with the Lamas, supporting what they needed and wanted. And Lama he spent some time with Rinpoche getting things organized in the mountains. And then he came back to Kathmandu and was filled with plans for building. So now we're back in Kathmandu, and Lama is in Laudo with Rinpoche, and they're starting Everest Center, and it will come to Kopan, and everything is moving along well. So, and we need some vehicles, because I'm planning to move to Kopan when there is space and some place to live, and I need vehicles. So I go to the king, my good friend, and he has so many foreign cars, and everything has been hand carried over the mountain to get them up to Nepal. So he shows me a Willis Jeep, which is in very good condition, good shape, and so I take that, and we need a vehicle because now many people are beginning to show up at Kopan. In Kathmandu, they've heard about the Lamas by word of mouth of the Lamas appearing on TV when you turn it off at night or some such thing. And so word has gotten out that there's something in the works. So we need, I find the king has an old Chevy, which is running well. I buy that. And then I see this 1932 convertible Hudson. Wow, my heart starts racing, and I gotta have that car. And I buy it, and I drive it around Kathmandu, unpaved roads. There are no roads on Kopan at all. So that's something we have to deal with. And so finally Lama comes back to Kopan, and he's full of ideas and desires and plans, and he is so excited. And so we start buying bricks and cement, and Chokidar gets workers, and everything comes into play. So it's moving very fast. And Lama is incredible. He is unreal. He stands up on the frame of the building, and he tells Chokidar, put bricks there, put bricks there, put bricks. He doesn't know what he's doing, but it turns out fine. And we build the Gompa, we build Norbalinka, we build resident quarters, kitchen, eating hall, and toilets and water and everything for bathing for the young monks. And it takes most of the 70s and early 71. By 71, we have the first ordination. Lama Yeshe has been pushing, and there are 7 of us long-term people, Dr. Nick and Marie and Mommy Max and Anila Ann. I called her at one point from Kathmandu. I couldn't have called, I don't think, unless it went through the embassy. Anyhow, I requested Anne, if she wanted teachings from Lamas, she could come and be with the Lamas all day while I'm working. And she gave up her job and jumped into a Volkswagen and drove the van to Kathmandu. That was a journey. And we had all this stuff going on, the water, a continuous route and load of water coming for building and mixing the cement and doing what had to be done. It was so much activity on the hill. It was incredible. And also, I couldn't move because there was no roads yet. But that was in my mind because I wanted to live at Kopan. So, anyhow, everything is going and working well, and Lama is heading everything and making all those decisions. At one point, Lama decides he has to go back to his home and village and visit because his health, I don't want to get into this story, but it has to be told. From walking from Tibet to India, Lama's heart was so bad. It was incredible. The doctors we saw, when I finally managed, I didn't know this. He finally had to tell me. His heart was totally, he had grown a vein around his heart to keep it together in shape. The doctor said he would have been dead years ago. No Western person could live with a heart like that. And so then began all the things to get him well and keep him well. But he wouldn't stop working. He was still building and doing and teaching and pushing Lama Zopa to start teaching the courses, literally both feet in his back, pushing him. And finally, Gusho gave in and started teaching, and Westerners started getting notices to come to Kopan from the city, from everywhere around the world. And so 71 we had the first course, and we had enough built that could take care of the small numbers that came. And then 72 and 73 was course 2 and 3 and going on. And at that time, Peter and Roger and Harvey and 3 other big guys from England showed up. And things just started moving on from there. 81 and 82, Lama disguised himself and went back to Tibet with his bad heart, and it was the straw that broke the camel's back because he paid with his life in 84. It was for his heart too much, but he got to see his monastery and what was left of his family's children and children and children, and the nuns and monks, and he went alone. I don't know. We went as far as China with him on the train and did some travel in China, but he went to Tibet alone and came back safely. So, at one point, Lama Yeshe decided that Zena needed some help from him. And he had decided, he brought Zena's child and her mother and some other beings connected with her to Kopan and that Sherpa area. And Lama gave Zena a special meditation, and he pulled a man off the airplane and took his seat so he could go and give Zena this initiation and meditation and practice, as he had discovered she didn't have very long to live, and that she would need certain time to finish. He put her, I think it was Thupten Churling at 9,000 feet, a nunnery with the nuns, and they took very good care of her. And he left the mother and daughter with her for a while, and other people would go by and visit her from time to time, monks and nuns and people that she knew who were trekking in the Sherpa country. And Zena managed to finish the practice that Lama Yeshe had given her. And then they brought Rhea back up for the last time to meet with her and her mother. And Zena left her body and went to visit the Lamas who were somewhere in Bodh Gaya, some teaching with His Holiness, and told them that she was on her journey now, on her way. But the Lama said, "Yes, Mom, we know she's on her way." So that was the end of one chapter. And everything came together where at one point I had moved, taken quarters in Asantol and Tinchuli, and Lama had said to me, because he was very concerned that I was not able to absorb the Dharma. He said I was obsessed with marriage. And I said, "No way, Jose, I am not marrying." And Lama said, "I have gone as far as I can." And with that, at one point, now Kopan was known throughout the world, and there were things happening, and Lama had taken me on out-of-the-body journeys, and I was making clothes. In 1980, he had sent me off somewhere. He gave me such an unreal, unbelievable parting. And it went on then to a nunnery, and to today, unbelievable things the Lama Rinpoche is doing, because Lama decided in 84 that his heart could no longer bear. We took him to Presbyteria somewhere in San Francisco, and he left his body in 1984 in America. Very difficult finding the right vehicle to take him where he needed to be. There was a time that we were on TV, I tried to get them interviewed with Oprah, but when my time came to speak, I froze. I couldn't utter a word. Lama was so disgusted with me, as he was many times. It was his nature, and it was love. It was from love. So much love he had. Oh, I think I'm finished. Not really finished. I'll never be finished. The Lamas gave me a reason to be, and it's been my whole life. It's the only thing that has made meaning in my life, is what the Lamas have given me and tried to instill in me. It's unreal. It's unbelievable how much love and compassion they have. And I hope my life has been worth meaning for them. I tried, but I had such a long way to go. And Lama would often do this out of love and compassion. I think he should have hit me on the head a couple of times. That would have helped. Oh, I'm so grateful. I owe everything to the Tibetans. And anyone who gets a chance, if you pass it up, you've missed the greatest opportunity you'll ever have. Thank you.